This is episode 68 of the Life in Norway Show. The Norwegian Coastal Voyage has grown in popularity over the last decade, while still providing a vital transport service for cargo and local passengers all along the Norwegian coastline. Travellers from all over the world now come to Norway to experience the full coastal voyage. For many years, Hurtigruten has been the only operator along the route, but now Havila Voyages are putting brand new ships into service, and travellers all of a sudden have a choice. Lasse Vangstein of Havila Voyages joins the show today to talk about the history of the coastal route, what makes the trip so special and attractive to international tourists, and what Havila's new ships have to offer. You can find out more information on everything we talk about today on the show notes page. Head on over to lifeinnorway.net/podcast and look for episode 68. Happy listening. I'd like to welcome Lasse Vangstein to the latest episode of the Life in Norway show. He is Head of Communications at Havila Voyages. Lasse, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Right, let's hear about you and how you got to where you are today.
Well, it's been a long journey, or voyage, maybe we should say, in this particular setting. I started out way back growing up in the travel and tourism industry, where my parents were responsible for a hotel up in Valdres, in the middle of Norway, in the middle of the mountains. So I actually had the travel industry in my bloodline from when I was young. I took my education at the Travel and Tourism College in Oslo for travel and communications, basically. And I worked a little bit around here and there, both in hotels and travel companies. And then suddenly I started working for Vålerenga football club in Oslo. Firstly as a communications advisor, then as the head of communications. After a few years there, kids started popping out and working in a football club with 40 weekends a year and a lot of traveling for training camps and stuff like that was just not the perfect fit for having small kids. So I started looking around and I got offered a job at Avinor at Oslo Airport as a communications advisor. Was there for about 6 years. Had a couple of years in between where I worked a little bit marketing for Boligpartner, and then I was a consultant for a PR company called Brainify. And then suddenly this job as a head of communications for Havila Voyages popped up. And I had been paying attention to Havila since they won the tender. And I thought it was a really exciting company. It was like an underdog towards a really, what should I say, a company that has a lot of knowledge in the market. So I was waiting for them to actually have this position available. And then suddenly I saw that they had a head of communications, and I was like, wow, did I miss it? And well, no, they had one for a period of time to handle the first ship in operation. And then it was the regular interviews, and I was lucky enough to be appointed the job, and I'm really happy about that.
Excellent. Well, congratulations on getting that job.
Thank you.
We will talk much more about Havila in the show because I think the name is going to be new to a lot of people, even those who are familiar with the coastal route, and even those who've maybe taken the Hurtigruten before. But let's talk in general terms first about the coastal voyage. People can come to Norway and let's say cruise in two ways. They can join a traditional cruise ship that goes into the fjords or possibly up to the north in this time of year to see the northern lights, or there's the coastal voyage. So what makes the coastal voyage a different experience from a fjords cruise?
Well, the thing is that it has a set route with a set timetable. It is a part of a critical infrastructure in Norway. So we always leave Bergen at 8:30 at night. We always stop at these set ports along the coast, all the way up to Kirkenes and back. So it's 34 ports going north and 33 going south. So it's a slow sail, because you could basically sail from Bergen to Tromsø in a shorter time. But since we have all these stops with goods and passengers that are using this as a coastal bus, basically along the coastline, especially up north, because sometimes a year it's both quicker and more convenient to take the coastal route from port to port than to drive a car or even take a plane, just because how our country is built. So it has been important for almost 130 years for the coastal communities and for the coastal nation Norway is. So that is a main difference, that this is basically, we're basically doing a two-way operation. We're doing our social mission in the tender with the Ministry of Transportation for goods and passengers, and we're doing travel and tourism with tourists coming in from both Norway and UK, Germany, US, Australia, everywhere basically, to experience the Norwegian coast and all that has to offer, from northern lights to midnight sun to the fjords, to mountains, to waterfalls and glaciers and whatnot, so it is different for sure. And of course, it's much smaller ships than the regular cruise liners. These are ships that are about 15,000 tons, gross tons, and we do not have the big pools. We do not have the casinos. It's a different kind of cruising for sure. So yeah.
I've experienced both concepts. I've taken the full route from Bergen to Kirkenes and back to Bergen again on the Hurtigruten several years ago now, on one of the smaller ships actually. But I've also taken the route as a local ferry passenger. I took my parents from Bodø across to Lofoten earlier in the year. And in a few months' time, I'll be taking the Hurtigruten down from Trondheim to Ålesund and Havila back from Ålesund to Trondheim. So first time I'll be testing out Havila. And what strikes me is you have this big mix of passengers. There are some there that are experiencing this as a 12-day cruise. They're eating the meals every day. They're going on excursions when they go into the ports. It is set up sort of like a cruise in many ways. And yet there's people like me then that are on there just sitting in the lounge for 3 hours with a beer, looking out of the window, and possibly even talking to some of those people that are on the 12-day cruise. So, but do you find that it surprises people who think they're booking a cruise that it is that kind of experience, or the most of your passengers that are booking the round trip, are they aware of what they're actually going to experience?
I think most of them are aware of it. I think most of them are aware that there will be several stops and that you have the option to do excursions at some ports, and also that you might experience meeting the locals. And I think that actually, no matter what company you travel with, is a good thing. You will be able to talk to locals and maybe gain some new experiences. Maybe they can tell you like a story about the community you're actually passing. A lot of them are probably sitting on the ship and can point out their house. This is where I grew up. I've been living there my whole life. This is our community. And of course, both companies, I think, have a lot of local produced food, for instance. So there's stories behind that as well, as you sail along the coast. So I think most people know or are aware of it, or at least they will be aware of it when they enter the ship in the information meetings and stuff like that, because we have people working on board that make sure that people understand what kind of concept this is. The thing is that there wouldn't be cruise tourists on these ships if it wouldn't have been for the timetable we have to follow.
Of course, yeah. I'm thinking about how you both Hurtigruten and Havila, they advertise the full round trip voyage, I think is the terminology. But then there's also smaller trips that are advertised as well in the international market. So Bergen to Tromsø, for example, or Trondheim to Tromsø. So broadly speaking, what percentage of the ship are taking the full voyage? I mean, maybe it varies through the year, but just sort of a ballpark idea here.
That's actually a really good question. That I don't have the exact numbers, but I know that a lot of the people that come from abroad to experience this do the full round trip voyage. And of course, there's also quite a few that does the Bergen-Kirkenes in particular. We have generally more passengers going north than south. So there's more people doing the Bergen-Kirkenes than the Kirkenes-Bergen. But then we're also, of course, offering Ålesund-Kirkenes, Ålesund, or Trondheim-Kirkenes, Trondheim, or just one of the legs. And we're also now, when we get 4 ships in full operation, we will also offer a hop-on, hop-off option. So you can go from Trondheim to Lofoten and then jump ship for 2 days, leave your luggage that you don't need, experience Lofoten, and jump on the next ship and get the same cabin in the twin sister ship, because our ships are completely identical. If you look away from the names and the names of the lighthouse suites and the art on the walls, the ships are identical. So you can basically hop on, hop off, and get the same cabin number, the same food, the same experience all around, just maybe a different staff.
What you were saying there about the difference going north and south, that was absolutely my experience. I took the MS Vesterålen, the Hurtigruten ship, but it's now the oldest one in the fleet. I think it wasn't at the time, but the capacity there was like under 500, I think. And going north, there were maybe 250 people, and then on coming south, I think the number was barely over 100. It was this time of year. It was January. It was probably the low season for the tourism side of the coastal route. And yeah, that was a very different experience, having lounges to yourself at times of day. Of course, I imagine it's the complete opposite experience in the summer. The ships are full. There's more of a bustling atmosphere. There's people coming and going. So
of course, you have the summertime. We have more passengers, of course. That is the high season for this route. But then again, we have our Northern Lights promise. So if you're doing a full trip round voyage and you don't experience the Northern Lights, then we'll offer you a northbound or southbound voyage for free between October and April. And we have a lot of, especially from the UK, that are really keen on experiencing the Northern Lights, and that actually have their goals that it's like a bucket list for them to experience that and use the coastal route to experience the Northern Lights. Because, of course, the chances are big that you will experience it in a 12-day round voyage.
Let's approach the topic of Havila now, but let's do it from looking through the history books. Can you tell us a bit about the history of the coastal route, when it started, why it started, how it started, and that sort of development through to today, and the recent decision from the government to open the tender again, and then Havila coming into being? I know that's a huge question, but if you could give us the Cliff Notes version, that would be great.
I'll do my best. So next year, the coastal route has its 130-year celebration. It started with a captain called Richard Witt, who in Stokmarknes actually, who decided that he wanted to connect basically Norway, north and south. So it started with that basically. And then through the years, it's been several different shipping companies that has operated the route. It hasn't always been Bergen-Kirkenes. At some point, they actually went all the way down south to Stavanger, and at some point, they didn't go all the way to Kirkenes. So the route, as we see today, I think has been for around 30 years, if I'm not mistaken. But people will probably let me know if I'm mistaken too badly right now. And then Havila Voyages is the 9th or 10th shipping company that operates the route. Up till a few years ago, it was our competitors Hurtigruten, who had all 11 sailings because it's an 11-night voyage. So you should have one ship each day departing Bergen, and then they meet along the coast. So it's 6 nights going north and 5 nights going south. But Hurtigruten was formed by 2 companies that were doing the coastal route. They merged and created the company Hurtigruten back in 2006. And then it was basically a monopoly on the route until the Ministry of Transportation decided that they wanted to split it up to 3 different tenders, 4, 4, and 3 days or ships back in 2018, I think. And then Havila, that was a company with a lot of shipping experience, had done fisheries offshore, had a couple of hotels. It's a big holding company, basically. Decided they wanted to go into travel and tourism even more. And they applied for the tender of 4 boats and won that. And then, of course, it was also a transfer of staff from the 4 ships that Hurtigruten lost, so the people wouldn't lose their jobs naturally. So that is the short version, I think.
Excellent. No, that's perfect. Passengers now have competition essentially on the route. They can choose between Hurtigruten ships and Havila ships, at least to some extent, because for local passengers and cargo, when you are really traveling on a specific day, then you're going to book on the ship that leaves on that day. There aren't Hurtigruten and Havila ships leaving on the same day, as you've explained. Mm-hmm. But I think the competition comes into it a little bit more for international tourists when they're maybe a little bit more flexible about the dates that they choose to leave Bergen on. So with that in mind, I know you've been dying to tell us about the ships and the company a bit more. So I'm going to let you loose now. Let's hear about Havila and why someone who's considering a journey on the coastal voyage might like to consider a journey on one of your new ships. How do they differ from the other ships that are running on the route?
Well, one of the key words you just said is the new ships. So these ships are brand new. They're newly built. Our oldest ship was put into operation 1 year and 2 days ago. So it's young, brand new, modern ships. They are by far the most environmental friendly ships that operate the route. We run on a plug-in hybrid version of liquefied natural gas, LNG, and batteries. And our battery packs are today the biggest installed in a passenger ship in the world, meaning that we can sail up to 4 hours emission-free. And this hybrid function reduces our CO2 emissions by up to 40% in like a perfect operation. And also the thing with natural gas, LNG, is that it's fully functional also to switch to biogas. And if we could just switch the LNG with the LBG, then we would be climate neutral today. But this, of course, we have to have the biogas available.
Yeah, that's not something you can do as a company on your own. You need the infrastructure to be available.
You need the infrastructure. You need our delivery people to actually have it. The companies that deliver the gas. As of today, biogas is actually cheaper than natural gas because of the energy crisis in Europe and the world itself. But of course, it has to do with how much we can get. And we need a lot of gas to operate these 4 ships. But we're looking into that and start actually gradually blending biogas into the tanks, which would reduce the CO2 even more. And then in the future, we hope to be climate neutral. So climate, environment, and sustainability is important for Havila Voyages. Our owner, main shareholder, and head of the board, Mr. Per Sævik, who actually turns 82 years old tomorrow, he has said that, we need to leave the area we operate in as we have it today for the people that come after. So the company decided to actually invest an extra 500 million kroners or 50 million euros in even more sustainable and environmental friendly objects to the ship, basically, the way that they're built, and the way they're designed. The ships are, of course, designed to run along the Norwegian coast, both in the hull design and other features. We reuse all the heat, so we don't have any excess spillage. The heat from the generators are reused to heat the ship, the shower, the water you shower in, and stuff like that. So there's a lot of features that have the climate environment in mind. And of course, our food concept is made of locally produced food. We want to create value where we operate. That is important to us. The whole coastal route itself, with 11 ships in full operation, creates about 3,000 jobs along the coast. So when the pandemic struck, 3,000 people lost their jobs when the route stopped sailing. So we are important to creating value along the coastline. So that is, of course, not what differs us. That's what makes both us and our competitors important. But what also maybe differs us a little bit is we have our standard cabins are a little larger than the other ships. Our lounges and areas for the common areas are larger. We don't have buffets in our restaurants. We only have like a la carte menu, both for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Small, basically almost tapas inspired dishes that are created, that everything is edible. You can order as much as you want, but with the smaller dishes, we see that we get less food waste. So our goal is to have maximum 75 grams food waste per person per day. If we reach that goal, we will reduce food waste with about 60 tons a year, compared to if we had a buffet solution for lunch or dinner or both, or breakfast for that matter. People that have been traveling with us are really happy with the food concept. They really enjoy it. It's tasteful. It's full of nutrition, and it's healthy. And of course, food is a big part of doing a 12-day round voyage. You want to eat good. You want to experience good Norwegian healthy food. So all ingredients we can get delivered from Norway, we get delivered from Norway. I think it's only like a couple of spices that are not grown in Norway that we have to get from abroad. Other than that, and also the menu changes to where you are on the route. So you have a fjord menu for Bergen, Trondheim, and then you have like an Arctic menu all the way up north and stuff like that. So there's some dishes that are the same the whole way, but there's also some dishes that changes to where we sail. So yeah,
I have to say I really enjoyed the food when I was on the Hurtigruten a few years ago, and very much looking forward to trying out the Havila, the concept.
I should look forward to
it. Next year. Yeah, absolutely. It sounds much more like what people would expect on a regular cruise ship in terms of a main dining room, where you can go for any of the 3 meals, and as you say, just order as many dishes as you want. They're typically smaller than they would be in a standard restaurant, because I think I do enjoy a buffet, and I think a lot of people do enjoy a buffet when they're traveling on a ship. But if you're having a buffet lunch and a buffet breakfast for 12 days, that can there are issues with that in terms of portion control, shall we say. But yes, that's
I just wanted to add another big difference is the sound, or actually the lack of sound. So these ships are really silent. It's almost so silent that we sometimes consider if we need to put in some contentum sound on the ship, because it's like eerie silence sometimes, especially when we go on pure battery. Then it's no sound at all. If you travel like in the World Heritage of Geirangerfjorden, we've done that on battery power, or in Trollfjorden, then you hear the waterfalls. The only sound you hear is the nature and the ship breaking the waves. But if it's flat sea, it's not breaking that much waves, but that's the sound you hear. You don't hear anything from the engine. You don't see the smoke coming out of the chimney because the natural gas is so clean, so we don't have any smoke at all. But the silence, that's really intriguing, just to experience how silent the ship is. You get some vibrations when docking or leaving port, but that is the thrusters that are working in the water. That is not the engine making a lot of noise. So it's really That was something that really surprised me the first time I was on one of the ships. Is like, wow, it is actually deadly silent.
Great. Talking now in more general terms again about the coastal route. One of the things that struck me when I was lucky enough to be on the bridge on the Hurtigruten for a half an hour or so in the winter, and it was only when I was there that I realized the importance of the schedule and the cargo delivery side of of the operations on the coastal route, because I think it was the first officer that was pretty much dedicated to that side of things. How do you balance delivering to that schedule for cargo for local passengers versus the round trip tourism and cruise experience? Because I wouldn't say they're necessarily in conflict with one another, but there is not a lot of crossover with those two areas. It must be an interesting challenge to operate.
Yeah, it requires a lot of planning, of course, and it requires experience that we luckily have. We have a lot of good staff that has done this for years. But then again, we wouldn't have the tourists there if it wasn't for the cargo deliveries and local passengers. So it's kind of, if you do this as a cruise, you just kind of have to be along for the ride. This is how we operate, and this is how we have to operate. And then, of course, we plan that to the extent that in ports where we have longer layovers, we can have excursions. So you can disembark the ship and experience the local community, even maybe do an excursion that takes you from one place to another. So you disembark and you embark in another port. For instance, you have like a snowmobile excursion up north in Finnmark. So you leave in Kjøllefjord and you embark again in Mehamn, for instance. But it's not in conflict at all. The cargo kind of just goes, you know. We have people that are dedicated to this. So we take on cargo at some places and we leave cargo at other places. And it's important for these local communities because it's not many other options to actually get big cargo to that place. So if a person up in Finnmark needs a new dishwasher, it probably has been transported by the coastal route and not on a truck or a semi. Yeah.
So the Norwegian government has decided that a couple of years from now, only zero emission vessels will be allowed to sail in the World Heritage Fjords, which it's the Geiranger Fjord and a couple of others around that area. Now, obviously, the coastal route is exactly that. It's a coastal route, but during the summer, it does typically go into the Geiranger Fjord, and at other times of year, it calls in some other areas. So, what sort of an impact is that legislation going to have on the operations of the coastal route? Will it change anything about the experience?
For us, it will not, because we've already done that in Geirangerfjorden this year, 4 years before the future legislation are put in place.
You mean you were sailing on battery power this summer?
On battery power in the whole World Heritage area of it. So with the stop we have in Geiranger, that takes a little over 3.5 hours from we enter until we exit. So we can do that with our battery packs today. So it won't change anything for us. So even if you're traveling with us next year or in 5 years' time, you will still be able to go all the way into Geiranger with our ship. So for cruise ships or coastal cruise ships or ferries in the future that want to visit Geirangerfjorden or the other World Heritage Fjords, they need to have the same features, or else they have to dock outside the World Heritage and bring their passengers in by, for instance, electric tender boats, which is an option, of course, because, of course, we hope that the industry follows. So we basically hope that we can take lead and show that it's possible. We've already shown that now 4 years ahead of time. People said this is impossible in 2018. They said this is impossible. You can't have this done. It's not even remotely possible that quick. And we did it only a few years later. So it is possible and it can be done, but it requires that you're willing to invest in it. It requires that you're willing to take the steps to actually get there. And that is we've proven that is possible. So I hope we get there, because it's important for those local communities as well. In the period of year where we sail Geiranger, of course, we contribute a lot to local valley creation in Geiranger and those areas. Of course, we have excursionists in winter as well, when we are docked in Ålesund for over 10 hours, but that is by tender boats or bus, preferably electric buses in the future, of course. But it can be done, and I'm in total agreement with the authorities that this should be put into place, so we actually savor the best parts that we have.
A couple more questions, just short ones about the ships, the Havila ships. What is your favorite place on one of the Havila vessels? Where's your happy place? I guess you don't actually sail on them very often, but I'm sure you've experienced them at least a couple of times.
I've been on board quite a few times. We have to facilitate for journalists like you and stuff like that as well when they're on press trips. So, and of course, it is important for us that work on land to be on the ships, to talk to the people on board, because this is our bread and butter. This is our most important staff. So we have to. But my favorite place that is not open for the public is the bridge. I just love being on the bridge, chatting with the officers, the view from the bridge, just experiencing how they operate these huge ships, because they are big. And I'm amazed every time when we go into a narrow sound on the maneuverability of the ships and how good these officers are. So I would say the bridge. But if we have a public common area on the ship, it will probably be the lounge on deck 9, which is above the bridge, actually. That is a panoramic view area. So you have the large windows all the way around, and you also have windows in the roof. So in the summertime, you can experience the midnight sun from inside. In the wintertime, you can sit inside and experience the northern lights, and you have a panoramic view of the areas you're sailing in. And it's really like, it's not even though it's a bar and a lounge, it's not very noisy. It's very calm, and people are just, getting down there. So yeah, I love the panoramic lounge and bar on the 9th deck.
And how about your favorite port stop of how many are there? It's 30 something?
34.
34, yeah. Which is your favorite?
We need to go far north, I think. Honningsvåg. We have the possibility to go to North Cape. You have some king crab excursions. You can do not a snowmobile, but the 4-wheelers, but they have the belts instead in the wintertime. You can even go ice fishing, with snowshoes and ice fishing. We are there for 3.5 hours. It's a really beautiful little coastal community, and you have a lot to do up there. And it's you come in through an area with no cell reception, narrow sounds, magnificent nature, really scarce nature. It's like almost no vegetation up there. So it's really unique. So I would probably say Honningsvåg if I had to pick one. Gun to the head, I have to pick one. Yeah.
I really enjoyed my time there. There was obviously the drive to the North Cape, and it was January, so there was a lot of snow around. But there was also a play. I don't know if they still do this. There was a play done by local youth group about life in Honningsvåg, a comedy sketch play. So I'm not sure if that still happens, but that was one of those things that you're not going to get anywhere else, because the play was all about the thousands of tourists that they get every year, and everyone wants to go to the North Cape, and no one necessarily wants to be in the town, and so on. So yeah, that was quite entertaining. Anyway, Lasse, we could talk all day, I'm sure, about the coastal route. There's so much to say, and we've covered just a small percentage of what there is to talk about. But We have run out of time. So I'm going to ask you before you leave the 3 questions I ask every guest on the Life in Norway show. These are normally answered by foreigners living in Norway. So it's always interesting to have a native Norwegian answer these questions. So some quick answers from you, please. What's the best thing about living in Norway?
It's the nature we have. We are so lucky to be able to just go outside our door and straight into nature. Even though we live in Oslo, you can go skiing. You can take the subway for 10 minutes and go skiing for how long as you want, or go fishing, as I love to do. So nature, for sure.
And the most challenging aspect of living here?
It's really expensive. So even though our pace, like we're paid to be able to live here, it is an expensive country. And also, I think, unfortunately, some Norwegians aren't that open. So we should work a little bit about being more open to other people than to just, your neighbor, being a little more polite. Hey, how are you doing? The chit chat.
And I've already asked you about your favorite port on the coastal route, but where is your favorite place in Norway, whether that's a town or a tiny hideaway somewhere?
Well, right now, or else my wife would probably give me hell. I mean this. Our cabin up in Valdres. I grew up in Valdres. We just built a cabin there that was open in January. We just love going there. It's skiing right outside the door. You can go alpine skiing 3 minutes away. A lot of fishing in the summertime. It's quiet. We just love going there. And right now, that is for sure my favorite place.
I went to Valdres for the first time last summer, I think, and that was after almost 10 years of living here, and I'd never made it to Valdres. Part of the reason is I don't own a car, so it's really a car place. But yeah, absolutely beautiful. And thinking about it, it's about as far away from the coastal route pretty much as you can get. So that's a very different experience for you there. Lasse, thanks so much for this today. Lots for people to think about if they're considering a coastal voyage. Where can people find out more about what Havila has to offer?
Well, then, of course, you have to go to our webpage, havilavoyages.com. You will find all our trips and excursions, information about the company, about the ships and cabins, food concept, everything you need, basically. So havilavoyages.com.
That's great. Lasse, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.